Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done reading Illborn. This is the first book in the Illborn Saga series by Daniel T. Jackson, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts when finishing the book, which was literally just right now. So I like this one. I am going to say some negative things about it, but I really, really like this. Borderline loved it. I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5. And yeah, this was a really, really, really enjoyable read. It kind of shocked me how good this was. I mean, I guess not. When I read a little bit about what this was about, not so much what it's about, but when I heard it was like a grimdark epic fantasy story, the odds of me liking it are spiked up. Over time, I've realized what kind of stuff I like and what I don't like, and I can be surprised in a good way or bad way, but you know, it can fairly inform my opinion pretty well. But when I'm going to read a grimdark book that's got this big scope, yeah, that's right up my alley. And this one did, and it did things even beyond that, which I thought were unique and fun and interesting. And I can't wait to keep reading this series. Just a great book, and definitely a book from an author that doesn't have a ton of experience. Maybe he does, but it seems to me like this is one of the first books this author has written. Definitely some prose issues, but some not well thought out pacing issues. But the plot was wonderful. You know, I think the characters were truly great and compelling. The world building, I've heard from some that they said it's not great. I loved it. It's totally enraptured me. You know, I could just soak in this map and this world and the different areas and the geopolitical situation going on. It's awesome. And so, but I find myself frustrated by this book because of some very clear issues that perhaps get solved, you know, down the line. And I'm very hopeful that they do. I don't know much about this author, so I can't make assumptions about the way that he writes, but you know, I'll just get it right out of the way. This book has 4 POV characters, and it jumps between them in pretty much a sequence. You know, you'll have character A, then B, then C, then D, and then back to A, and then B, then C, then D. They all get about a quarter of the book. And right there, I have a little bit of a problem. Not so much of a problem that I'm going to knock down a score, but just as a personal preference to me, I dislike it when books have that rigid structure, and it's frustrating because what happens when you do that is it leads you to be relying on cliffhangers constantly, and I don't like that. I don't like cliffhangers. I think when I was younger, I enjoyed cliffhangers. They serve a purpose. They make you really intrigued and into what you're going to read next. But I find it's just an overused tool at this point, and I don't enjoy them. I'd rather you go through an arc and tell me a story instead of just trying to hook me. Now, it's more excusable, the fact that the cliffhangers are not like bookend cliffhangers. They're chapter cliffhangers, which, you know, fine. I can wait another, 45 minutes or an hour until I get back to that character and resolve that little arc again. And it does make the little arcs themselves fun because you know that each arc is going to solve a little problem that they're having, go through a little story, a little mini story again, and then end on another dramatic sequence. But that becomes rather formulaic at a certain point, and you can come to expect that these things are going to be happening towards the end of the book that are unexpected. And to expect the unexpected is not what you're looking for as an author. That all of a sudden becomes not unexpected. And so that's a little bit of a beef I have. I'd much rather authors do the Robert Jordan thing, where he would just go off and tell a story for a while and wait for that little arc to be wrapped up. Then he decided to go on and tell another story and then come back to that character, not 4 chapters later, but 20 chapters later, because he spent 4 or 5 chapters on this character and resolved this arc, and now we need to move on to another one. So that's a preference. But the bigger problem I have here is because that happens in a lot of books, right? And even books that I love. You know, Bloodsworn Saga does a lot of that. John Gwynne loves doing cliffhangers, and I love John Gwynne, so that's fine. My bigger problem is these 4 characters have almost nothing to do with each other. I almost feel like this could have been written legitimately as 4 novellas because of how little the stories connect to each other. There is some connection towards the end of the book, but not much. I mean, it is pretty limited. And that's weird. I don't think I've ever read a book that does this. You think about the epic fantasy stories that are very famous, and I constantly bring up A Song of Ice and Fire on this channel, not because it's my favorite series. It is one of my favorite series, but because most people that are watching these videos have probably read the books or watched the show, and you understand kind of what I'm talking about. But they do a lot of things in that series that has some disconnection. The whole Daenerys arc is almost entirely disconnected from the others until later on in the series. But that's one character that does this. The other characters are constantly having this involved situation that brings everything home. In this one, really, it's like 4 different corners of the map. And obviously they're going to connect at some point, but it didn't happen in this book. So it was just very off-putting and strange, and it ruined any sense of cohesion. It ruined that ability to tie everything back together, and that sucks. Another thing I had a problem with, and then we're going to go into the things that I loved about this and talk in more detail about that, because I give it a 4.5. I really loved a lot about this book, but I want to get these things out of the way because they're things that I feel like could have been fixed that I had a big problem with. But it's this other aspect that this story is essentially about religion, and in a very fun way, where these 4 characters that they have these POVs are somewhat chosen ones, where they have these powers that they should not have. And the church is trying to root out people that have these powers. And so they all 4 have this in common, where they don't realize that they have these powers as the story begins. But as the story goes along, they find out that they have them. And trying to evade the church and stay away from the people that are hunting people like them. But it's as if all 4 characters have a very similar revelation over many chapters, where each of the 4 characters goes like, oh, I have these powers. That's weird. How do these powers work? Oh, here's how they work. Let me explore these powers. And oh, the church doesn't want that. Let me try to stay away from the church. And when you read that once, that's really intriguing. I love that. You read it twice, and you're like, okay, that feels a little bit repetitive. But you read it 4 times, and it sucks up the fun from that aspect of things. It's just overdone. It feels as if this should have been, 3 POVs. And so I'm struggling, or figure out a way to speed up these revelation moments in the other characters, because it's fun to unravel them as the reader, but we've already unraveled it. We're just watching the inevitability of another character unraveling something that we as the reader already know. So those are my problems with the book. That's why it's not perfect. Let's talk a little bit more about this thing and why I liked it so much. So let's go over the characters and the general kind of plot here. So first you've got Arion, or Arion, A-R-I-O-N, Arion. He is the son of a duke, and he is the noble born of this group. He is not the highest on the social status here. Arion, his father is a duke. The duke bows to the king. The king is one of 4 kings. One of them calls himself an emperor. One of them calls himself like the religious head. But 4 heads of state that are essentially in charge of this continent. And so you get to see things from that perspective. And this character with a large amount of power and authority trying to deal with the situation that he finds himself in. Then you've got Alanna, who is the daughter of a prostitute, who finds herself in the first of her chapters where her mother is dead, and she is about to get raped by a senior priest. She kills the senior priest, as, go Alanna, and realizes, I'm going to be hunted now. And so she has to go on the run and find a way to get away. Then you've got Lyanna. Hate when there's 2 POVs with virtually identical names. That took me a little while to connect with. But you've got Lyanna. Lyanna is studying to become a priestess herself and enter into this church as she finds herself having these powers. And she believes that these powers are a gift from God, even though the head priest of the religion says that these are definitively not godly traits, and these are things to be rooted out and burned at the stake. And finally, you have 𝐿born, the most disconnected of all of these, and he finds himself on another corner of the map entirely. And he is part of like a Viking-ish clan, where they raid other clans and they live in these, huts and a much more primitive form of living, and finds himself very quickly in the story outcast from his clan and trying to figure out how he can figure out a way to survive. So you've got these 4 very different stories, but all of them are riveting. They have intense action moments. They have these stories where every time I went to a new chapter, I was excited because I got to resolve something from the previous chapter, and all of them were intriguing to me. Now, I'm sure not all 4 are going to connect with every single reader, but for me, they did. I thoroughly enjoyed them. And I love this greater scope to the story with this church getting involved and the huge, countries coming together and fighting each other and trying to make alliances. It's got this great political angle to things. It's everything that I would want in a story. The grimdark is ratcheted up here. I mean, this is a very dark and depressing type story. I love that. That's all up my alley. I love that kind of thing. There are some very morally horrific things that happen in this book that you have to kind of be aware of. And if you find yourself with trigger warnings on things like sexual abuse, sexual violence, there's problems in this book. But the opposite of what you may think. There is one of the characters, this prostitute girl that I mentioned above, this Alana character. All 4 of these characters have similar powers, but also different. Alana's is she has like the power of like lust, where if she tries to, she can make any man who is attracted to her be uncontrollably attracted to her and be able to control them in this way. And she quite literally, and it doesn't like describe it like this, but quite literally rapes multiple men in this story who, if she didn't have this power, would not end up sleeping with her, but she convinces these people to sleep with her against their will, even though they think it's their will, but it's not. So she's a rapist multiple times in the story. Now, it's balanced out, I think, not because she's a woman, but because if she didn't do that, she would probably die. So there's some excusability here. But it is disturbing. And if you don't like that kind of thing, then you might have a problem with this book, that maybe an unexcusable problem. But it made for a compelling character to me. And I like it when characters have to do really horrific things. It builds drama. It builds tension. And so, yeah, I loved her chapters. And every time these moments happen, I feel bad for her. I feel bad for the men that are involved in this. I'm very sympathetic to a lot of the characters in the story for what they go through, and trying to think about what I would be doing myself if I were stuck in this situation, and trying to, put on this self-preservation and the things, the levels that I would go to do that. And so, yeah, she's a compelling character, and I get it. Now, don't kind of twist my words and be like, oh, Matt would totally love to rape people. No, not at all. But it does make for a compelling character and a fun read. I don't know about fun, but an intriguing read, something I didn't want to put down. So, yeah, this thing's really good. I am very intrigued to read further on in the story. I can't wait to find out where this goes. The end of the story really ratcheted things up. It made some revelations that I was not ready for. And it set the characters up in a way that really, really, really is going to make me not stop thinking about this thing until I read the next one. The series is not finished, however. I believe only the first 2 books are out. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy or more, but it hasn't been terribly long since the first one came out. So it seems like the author's, dedicated to kind of going through. So I'm definitely going to catch up to the series before the year is done. I'll probably 3 or 4 months is usually my sequence until I can read the next book in a series because of how long my TBR is. But yeah, can't wait to read it and catch up and then rave about the series, hopefully, if it's good, and read that 3rd book day 1 when it comes out and just be caught up with everybody. So, yep, that's it. Check this thing out if you like grimdark stuff. It's a really, really intriguing read. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gil, Gregory, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗏𝘅𝑒𝑟𝑐𝑖𝑎, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Tommy, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, and Wacky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.